Hi everyone, it's Michelle from Scrap Secrets, and this week's Sketch Sunday comes to you from My Favorite Things. It's a weekly sketch challenge number 321. So I'm just showing you the products that I'm using, and I will go through them a little bit more slowly. This video was really long, and I kind of just wanted to get it started. So the sentiment that I am stamping now in Versamark ink is from the Somebunny I Love stamp set, and it says, "Dream until your dreams come true." And then we're going to be using some Martha Stewart Antique Gold Embossing Powder to emboss the sentiment. Now, I don't know if it's because my embossing powder was old or my gun stinks, I didn't have it heated up enough, or just haven't embossed in a really long time, but it took me a while to do this embossing, so that's why this video is super sped up, because a lot of this I was having difficulty with, and actually did a lot of it off camera because it was taking too long. So I couldn't get the sentiment to stamp heat emboss correctly, so I stopped the camera. I actually heated it up. Sometimes it's hard to tell exactly where the heat is, and you don't want to burn the sentiment, so that's why I did it off camera. It was a little easier to see. So we're going to be using the same embossing powder that we used for the sentiment, and we're going to be doing the background of the piece, and that is the stamp set Starry Night Builder. It's My Favorite Things red rubber background stamp. So as you can see, I put a piece of watercolor, it's a Canson XL watercolor paper, cardstock down onto my MISTI, and then I inked up the stamp with Versamark ink and then just went over it 2 times. Now, the reason I did it 2 times and I used the MISTI is because that watercolor paper has a rougher texture, so sometimes it's hard to get a good impression the first time. And as you'll see, I didn't really do a good job this time, but with the amount of the card that we actually cut out, it doesn't really matter. So I'm going to be sprinkling on a lot of that antique gold embossing powder. Now don't worry, all of that excess is actually going to go right back into the jar, which is why I have that sheet of paper underneath. It's just a random piece of flyer that I had lying around, and you can use anything pretty much to funnel the embossing powder back into the jar. So here you will see me do just that. So none of it really gets wasted, except for that little bit that fell onto the mat. So now I'm using my reverse tweezers from Cricut, and the same type of thing was happening. I was having a really difficult time, and I was trying to show you guys how it heat embossed, but it didn't do a really good job. So again, I did a lot of this off camera, and a lot of that middle section that did not get stamped very well is actually going to be cut out, so it doesn't matter. So this is a circle die from, I believe it's Sizzix, and I'm just actually attaching that panel to 1/8 of an inch larger black cardstock piece so that I can cut through 2 layers at the same time. Took some washi tape and taped the circle down, just checking to make sure my sentiment piece is going to look okay underneath of it. I gave it enough room. So now we're going to use the Cuttlebug to try and go through it. Now, I had to do this several times, and you can see it was a little difficult at certain points because it's 2 sheets of cardstock, and it didn't really want to cut through. So I did it twice there, and then I'm going to put it back on because it wasn't cut through all the way. I thought maybe it was because my mat was a little bit saggy in the middle, so turned the paper around, tried it again, and it almost completely cut through. So I kind of helped it along by peeling it out, and there was a couple spots that I just went back in with my scissors and cleaned up. So a lot of that middle starry piece there was one that didn't really emboss. So now I'm going to take my front panel and line it up with the card base and tape down the circle where the cutout is going to be. Just wanted to make sure that was the right size, so I put the remaining circle on it. Went through. Now the cardstock is a little bit thicker, and the watercolor paper is a little bit thicker than cardstock, so but I only ran it through once, which was fine. So I decided to actually use that excess piece and emboss on that, so for the center piece. So now we have to put the black piece back in there. We took it out for the red rubber stamping, and we're going to be stamping the bunny in the bed from that same Somebunny I Love stamp set from My Favorite Things, and I'm inking it up several times with Versamark ink just to make sure I get a good impression. And then I'm taking a couple of stars. There's a star cluster and then 2 random stars, and I'm going to be doing the same thing and inking them up in Versamark ink. Now, you couldn't see it, but I could tell where the other image was stamped, so that it doesn't matter that I wasn't stamping on top of things. Now I'm going to take some Zing embossing powder in charcoal. And this is the first time I've ever used this one. And spray it or sprinkle it on top of the image, and then I took a dry brush just to kind of wipe off those pieces. I don't have an static cling embossing tool, which I really have to get, but so to get off those random pieces, I just used a dry paintbrush, and it wipes off pretty nicely. And now I heat embossed that off camera, and now we're going to be doing the backgrounds for the piece. I really should have done this before I attached it to the black card, or just use temporary adhesive and take it off, because it warped a little bit because of the black cardstock underneath. But I am using Distressed Inks in Dusty Concord and Chipped Sapphire to kind of create a night sky. Now, it's almost like dry brushing it on. I didn't have a lot of water on the bottom, but the stars, because they're embossed, are actually going to resist that distress ink, so they won't get dyed that color. So I put a lot more of the Chipped Sapphire on than I did the Dusty Concord. I just tried to keep the Dusty Concord at the top, and you can see it buckled a little bit there where there was some tape, but I think it came out good overall. And now the next thing we're going to do is clean off the mat, and then we're going to start working on the bunny. So for the bunny, I actually used Pumice Stone for his face. The nose was a little bit different. I think I used hickory smoke for the nose. And then I used Tumbled Glass for the bedding. I also used Salty Ocean, I believe. And I used ground espresso for the posts on the bed, the little bottom bed. And now you'll see that I pick up a different brush in a minute because that was really small and there was some green on it. So it actually created kind of a marbleized effect, and I actually liked it. Gave it a different tone, and it gave it a little bit of depth. So it was not what I was going for, but because my paintbrush was not clean, it didn't come out exactly the way that I wanted it to, but it kind of looks cool. It kind of looks like a marbleized effect. And then I went back in with some Tumbled Glass and did the top of the sheet and did the pillow with that. So that was just me coloring in. This is a fairly quick technique to do. I do really like watercoloring with distressed inks. I think they work very nicely, and when you emboss them, you don't really have to worry about going outside of the lines or coloring two parts of an image next to each other, because the emboss resists that and keeps the colors apart. So there you see me using the ground espresso for the little post on the bottom of the bed, and actually I used that for around his mouth, and it's very, very light. I made sure that I watered it down a lot. So it's just putting the piece over top of it just to see kind of the ratio of the purple to the blue on my project. And there again, I picked up the same brush that had the little bit of green in it. So I just kind of tried to take a little bit of the green out, and I went back in with that smaller brush, but it wasn't giving the same effect that the big brush had. So I picked up the big brush and I just used it very carefully against the image. That big brush gives bigger strokes, and it was more like a painting effect rather than the small brush, which I wasn't really loving that effect. Went in with some purples and some blues. It actually came out to be pretty close to where the initial piece was. So I'm not worried about going over the stars. I'm just worried about the middle image. You could mask that if you wanted to, but it wasn't that big of a deal to me. I just tried to get just keep the colors apart. But I'm going to be doing something else over the stars, so it didn't really matter. So just kind of going over the rest of the image and then putting it off to the side to dry. I thought that I would put the card front on the card base first using my ATG gun. This is the general purpose one, not the acid free one, because we don't have to worry about the acid in the papers. If you were doing something with a photo on it, you would want to worry about it. So I just kind of line that up with the corners and put on, and then put my centerpiece on. There's a part where I put a strip of black cardstock on, but that didn't turn out so good. So I should have cut it out of the video, but fast forwarding it like this, there wasn't too much of it in the video. And I just popped the piece into place so that you can see it through the opening when the card base is closed. So now I'm going to put that little black strip on there, which really was kind of a waste of time for me. I got my Zig 2A glue pen out and tried to do it that way, and there was nothing there. That it didn't really stay on. So now I'm putting my sentiment together. I cut a piece of black cardstock that was a little bit bigger than the sentiment strip and just put it on the front underneath the circle, because if you saw the sketch, there is a line and then the bottom. And then I decided to go back in with my Stickles. Now these are the goldenrod Stickles, and just go over the stars. And then I was finished the card. It was pretty easy. It was a long card making process, but I think that it came out really good. Oh, there you go. I was trying with the black strip and it really did not come out good. Again, I should have cut this part out, but I did not. I like to leave in my mistakes sometimes just to show you guys that sometimes I try things and, you know, I have a good idea in my head, but it doesn't come out the way that I thought it would. I tried to use my scissors and cut out the back of it, and it was just such a tiny, narrow strip that I probably should have used my cutter first to try to do it, but I couldn't get the dimensions right, and it didn't work. So eventually I end up just peeling it off and then pretty much calling it a day for the card base. I tried to round the corners, and again, you'll just see that it doesn't work. It just comes down to be too narrow of a black strip. I could go back in with a black marker and draw that on, but it's really fine. It doesn't bother me that much that the black strip skips over the circle. So that's it, and I will show you it compared to the sketch. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have comments or questions, please feel free to leave them below, and I'll see you soon in the next video. Bye!